All right, fifth graders, today we are finishing our book, I Am Malala. We are finally going to hear the end of the story, which we know is not really the end for Malala, just the beginning, about how she overcame all of the education challenges that she faced and how she is an inspiration and role model to us all. Um, and how there's so many other lessons that she taught us in this story. So we can definitely take some time at the end of this to reflect on how she's similar to us in so many ways, how she's just a child who acts as a child at some points, and how she's learning to be an adult and grow up just as you all are as well. And those are just as important lessons to learn going through life. So let's get started. Chapter 34, The One Thing We All Know. A few things remain the same in this new world. One, I still fight with Kushal, or rather, he fights with me and I oblige him. We fight over who gets the front seat on the way to school. We fight over what station to listen to on the radio. He tells me I have a big nose. I tell him he is fat. He tries to give me a punch when we pull up in front of his school, and I lock the door as he tries to get out. I may be an advocate for free speech and human rights in public, but with my brother, I admit I can be a dictator. 2. Moniba and I have gone back to our silly old feuding. We Skype as often as we can, but we seem to start each chat the same way. Oh, Malala, she says, you've forgotten all about me. And I say, Moniba, you're the one who's forgotten about me. After we've gotten that out of the way, we get down to having a good gossip. Sometimes talking with Moniba and my friends at home makes me more homesick. I can almost smell the wood smoke drifting up the alley or hear the horns honking on Haji Baba Road. I've seen many other places, but my valley remains to me the most beautiful place in the world. I will go back to Pakistan eventually, but whenever I tell my father I want to go home, he finds excuses. No, Johnny, he says, your medical treatment is not complete. Or, these schools are good. You must stay here until you have learned all you can. He doesn't say the one thing we all know. It will be a long time before we can go home. Going home is the one thing we don't talk about, especially now that Fazlullah has risen from the head of the Taliban in Swat to the head of the Taliban in all of Pakistan. I know this new life is something hard for my brothers. They must feel as if a giant wind suddenly picked them up in Pakistan, blew them across the globe, and set them down here in this foreign place. As for Atal, he doesn't understand all the media fuss around me. I don't understand why Malala is famous, he said to my father. What has this girl done? To the world, I may be Malala, the girl who fought for human rights. To my brothers, I'm the same old Malala they've been living with and fighting with all these years. I'm just the big sister. My mother, though, sometimes treats me as if I'm the baby, not the oldest. She can be very protective, and sometimes, out of nowhere, she will come over and hug me and cry. I know she's thinking about how she almost lost me. Often I catch sight of her wandering in the garden out back, her head covered by her shawl. She feeds the birds from leftovers she keeps on the windowsill, just as she used to do back home. I'm sure she is thinking of all the hungry children who used to eat breakfast at our house before school in the morning, and wondering if anyone is feeding them now. Sometimes my father cries too. He cries when he recalls those first days after the attack, when I was somewhere between life and death. He cries at the memory of the attack itself. He cries with relief when he wakes up from an afternoon nap to hear his children's voices in the yard and realize that I am alive. I don't get angry very often, but I do get angry when people say he is responsible for what happened to me. As if he forced me to speak out, as if I didn't have a mind of my own. If only they could see him now. Everything he worked for almost 20 years has been left behind. The school he started from nothing, the school that now has 3 buildings and 1,100 children. He used to love nothing more than to stand at the gate and greet the students in the morning. The Kushal school carries on, and each day students pass through that gate, but he is not there to see it. Instead, he goes to conferences on girls' education, and he speaks out for peace as he used to do in SWAT. I know it's odd for him now that people want to hear him because of me and not the other way around. Malala used to be known as my daughter, he says, but I am proud to say that now I am known as Malala's father. It's not safe for us to go to Pakistan, that is true. But one day when we were homesick, we realized we could bring Pakistan to us. Friends and family come to visit, and Shazia and Kanai, who both go to college in England, stay with us during holidays. My mother is much happier when she has a house full of guests and extra chairs around the dining table. As her happiness grows, so does her willingness to try new things. She has begun to learn English again. She has also begun appearing in public without her shawl covering her face, and has even allowed herself to be photographed. My father, meanwhile, has taken on a new responsibility at home. Recently, I teased him that while he and I were busy speaking about women's rights, my mother is still doing the cooking and cleaning. Now he cooks every morning. It's the same thing every time: fried eggs. His cooking is full of love, but not full of flavor. He has done some brave things in the past, starting a school without a coin in his pocket, standing up for women's rights and girls' education, and standing up to the Taliban. But now my brave, proud, passionate father has taken on the pots and the pans. Chapter 35. As the first anniversary of the shooting approached, many journalists came to interview me. They often seemed so sad about what had happened to me. They said things like, "You and your family have had to leave your home. You have to live in fear. You have had to suffer so much." And even though I was the one who'd gone through the experience, I wasn't nearly as sad as they were. I guess I see my situation differently. If you tell yourself, "Malala, you can never go home because you are the target of the Taliban," you just keep suffering. I look at it this way: I can see, I can hear, I can talk, I can go to school, and I can fight with my brothers. I'm having a second chance at life, and I am living the life God wants for me. The journalists also ask if I'm afraid. I say no, and that is true. What I don't say is that I am afraid of one thing. I wonder sometimes if I will be the same Malala in the future. Will I be deserving of all these honors I've been given? Sometimes when the journalists see my brothers playing so freely, they ask if I'm being robbed of a childhood by my campaign for children's rights. I tell them to think of a girl who was married off at 11, or a little boy who has to pick through the rubbish heap to earn money for his family, or the children who have been killed by bombs and bullets. They are the children who have been robbed of a childhood. And sometimes the journalists seem to want to focus on the attack rather than on my campaign. This frustrates me, but I understand it. It is human curiosity. Here's how I think of it, though. They have already harmed me, leaving permanent scars. But out of the violence and tragedy came opportunity. I never forget that, especially when I think of all the good the Malala Fund has done and will continue to do. We have started a project in SWAT for girls suffering from domestic child labor. We support them so they can go to school and eventually become independent. After months of talking about how much I wanted to help in Jordan, we arranged a trip to help Syrian refugees, many of whom have already missed school for 3 years. I met children there in dirty clothes with no shoes and only a small bag of possessions. I met children there whom I will never forget. It's our duty to help these children get food, shelter, and an education, and we will. I think of the world as a family. When one of us is suffering, we must all pitch in and help. Because when people say they support me, they're really saying they support girls' education. So yes, the Taliban have shot me, but they can only shoot a body. They cannot shoot my dreams. They cannot kill my beliefs, and they cannot stop my campaign to see every girl and every boy in school. Millions of people prayed for me, and God spared me. I'm still here for a reason, and it is to use my life to help people. Chapter 36. One girl among many. On my 16th birthday, I was given the most extraordinary gift. I was invited to speak to the United Nations. It was the first of 2 trips I would make to New York that year. 400 people would be in attendance, high-ranking officials from all over the world, such as Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and Gordon Brown, the former UK Prime Minister, as well as ordinary children like me. It would be a far cry from the solemn and fearful birthdays I had spent in Pakistan not long ago. My whole family traveled to New York. We saw Annie on Broadway, and we stayed in a hotel where they bring pizza to your room on a silver tray. I liked the hustle and bustle of New York compared with sleepy Birmingham, and I felt as if the city were my old friends after seeing it on Ugly Betty. Many people in Pakistan have told me that the United States is a dark and godless place, but everyone I met there was quite nice. I couldn't wait to tell Moniba. America is a very nice place, but it was just as loud and crowded as other cities I've seen, with its honking horns and people rushing here and there. It's like a developed Karachi. During my second trip, I met one of my favorite people in the United States, a man named Jon Stewart, who invited me to his TV show to talk about my first book and the Malala Fund. He took my campaign very seriously, but he also made funny faces and asked if he could adopt me. I also met the real ugly Betty, America Ferrera, who is very pretty, and even President Barack Obama and his family. I was respectful, I believe, but I told him I did not like his drone strikes on Pakistan, that when they kill one bad person, innocent people are killed too, and terrorism spreads more. I also told him that if America spent less money on weapons and war and more on education, the world would be a better place. If God has given you a voice, I decided, you must use it, even if it is to disagree with the President of the United States. The day of the UN speech, I was excited. I'd had amazing experiences and met amazing people. I'd even met the Queen of England and Prince Harry and David Beckham one day. But I was still me, a girl who likes to crack her knuckles as loud as she can and draw pictures to explain things. A girl who hates pasta and likes cupcakes and will always like her mother's rice. And now loves cheesy Wotsits and fish fingers. A girl who has to stay up late studying for her physics test. A girl who worries if her best friend is mad at her. A girl like any other. Was it really possible that I was going to address the United Nations? How my world has changed. I dressed slowly that morning, putting on my favorite pink shalwar kameez and one of Benzinier Bhutto's scarves. I had not written my speech with only the delegates in mind. I wrote it for every person around the world who could take courage from my words and stand up for his or her rights. I don't want to be thought of as the girl who was shot by the Taliban, but as the girl who fought for education, the girl who stands up for peace, with knowledge as her weapon. I said in my speech, "Dear brothers and sisters, do remember one thing. Malala Day is not my day. Today is the day of every woman, every boy, and every girl who has raised their voice for their rights. Thousands of people have been killed by the terrorists, and millions have been injured. I am just one of them. So here I stand, one girl among many. I speak not for myself, but for all girls and boys. I raise up my voice not so that I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. Those who have fought for their rights, their right to live in peace, their right to be treated with dignity, their right to equality of opportunity, their right to be educated." On the 9th of October 2012, the Taliban shot me on the left side of my forehead. They shot my friends too. They thought that the bullets would silence us, but they failed. And then, out of that silence came thousands of voices. The terrorists thought they could change our aims and stop our ambitions, but nothing changed in my life except this. Weakness, fear, and hopelessness died. Strength, power, and courage was born. I am the same Malala. My ambitions are the same. My hopes are the same. My dreams are the same. One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world. As I heard the applause and took my seat, all I could think of was that I had come a long way from Malala, the toddler, giving lessons to the empty chairs at the Kushal school, and a long way from the girls who gave speeches to the bathroom mirror. Somehow, by the grace of God, I really was speaking to millions of people. I had once again asked God to make me taller. I have realized that God has answered my prayer. God has made me as tall as the sky, so tall I could not measure myself, but my voice could reach people everywhere. I had promised 100 rakat nafil, but when I'd first asked God to give me height, so I have given him those prayers. But I know that with the immeasurable height, God has also given me a responsibility and a gift. The responsibility to make the world a more peaceful place, which I carry with me every moment of every day, and the gift to be able to do so. Peace in every home, every street, every village, every country. This is my dream. Education for every boy and every girl in the world. To sit down on a chair and read my books with all my friends at school is my right. To see each and every human being with a smile of true happiness is my wish. I am Malala. My world has changed, but I have not. That is the end of the story. I have chills reading her speeches. We have one last chapter. It's the epilogue. October 2015. Over a year has passed since the first edition of this book came out, and 3 years since the October morning when I was shot by the Taliban on a school bus on my way home from class. My family has been through many things. We were plucked from our mountain valley in Swat, Pakistan, and transported to a brick house in Birmingham, England. England's second biggest city. I have met world leaders and made friends in new schools. A documentary film was made about my family and me. I was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Sometimes it all seems so strange that I want to pinch myself. I'm 18 now, and one thing that has not changed is that I still don't like getting up in the morning. The most astonishing thing is that it's my father whose voice wakes me now. He gets up first every day and prepares breakfast for me, my mother, and my brothers, Atal and Kushal. He doesn't let his work go unnoticed, of course, going on about how he squeezes fresh orange juice, fries eggs, heats flatbread, and takes the honey out of the cupboard. It's only breakfast, I tease. My brothers and I then all rush off to our different schools, and so does our mother, which truly is one of the biggest changes of all. She attends a language center 5 days a week to learn how to read and write and also to speak English. My mother had no education, and perhaps that was the reason she always encouraged us to go to school. Don't wake up like me and realize what you've missed years later, she says. She's faced so many challenges in her daily life in England because, up until now, she's had difficulty communicating when she's gone shopping or to the doctors or the bank. Getting an education is helping her become more confident so that she can speak up outside the home, not just inside with us. At first, I thought we would never feel settled here, but Birmingham has started to feel like home. It will never be Swat, which I miss every day, but now when I travel to other places and return to this new house, it does feel like home. I have even stopped thinking about the constant rain, although I laugh when my friends here complain about the heat when it's 77 degrees Fahrenheit. To me, that feels like spring. Although I have made friends at my new school, Moniba is still my best friend, and we Skype for hours at a time to catch up on everything. When she talks about the parties back in Swat, I so wish I was there. I still keep in touch with Shazia and Kainat, the other two girls who were shot on the bus, and are now at Atlantic College in Wales. It is hard for them being so far away and in such a different culture, but they know they have a great opportunity to fulfill their dreams of helping their communities. The school system here is quite different from the one we had in Pakistan. In my old school, I was considered the smart girl. I had this idea that I would always be the smartest one, and that whether or not I worked hard, I would always come in first. Here in the UK, the teachers expect more from their students. In Pakistan, we used to write long answers. You really could write anything you liked. Sometimes the examiners would get tired and give up reading part of the way through, but still give you high marks. In England, the questions are often longer than the answers. Perhaps the expectation is in Pakistan were lower because it was so challenging just to be in school. We didn't have good science labs, computers, or libraries. All we had was a teacher with a whiteboard standing in front of the students and their textbooks. Back home, I was called a bookish girl because I had read 8 or 9 books. But when I came to the UK, I met girls who had read hundreds. Now I realize I've read hardly anything at all. And I want to read all those hundreds of books. I've done my GCSEs, which stands for General Certificate of Secondary Education, and it's a series of tests in the UK that a student must take. They are extremely important, especially if you plan to continue your education, which of course I do. It was the happiest day of my life when I found out I did well. Eventually, I will do my A-levels, more UK tests. Then I plan to go to the university to study politics and philosophy. I'm still hopeful that I can return to Swat and see my friends, my teachers, my school, and my house again. Perhaps it'll take time, but I'm sure it will be possible one day. My dream is to return to the country where I was born and become an influential politician so that I can serve the people. Sadly, Maulana Fazlullah, the man who was the head of the Swat Taliban, who ordered the attack on me, is still the head of the whole Pakistan Taliban. That has made it even riskier for me to return. But I will get an education. I will learn about history. I will meet interesting people and listen to their opinions, and I will continue to fight against ignorance and terrorism. Thanks to the extraordinary doctors here in Birmingham, my health is good. When I first got out of the hospital, I had physiotherapy once a week to help me heal, and I needed a lot of support. The doctors say that my facial nerve is now up to 96% recovered. The cochlear implant has helped me my hearing, and the doctors say that in the future they may come up with even better, newer technology. I don't get headaches anymore, and I play sports, though people still take care not to throw a ball at my head. I'm fairly good in some sports, like cricket and rounders, which I'm told is similar to the American game baseball, though, of course, my brothers disagree. My brothers have settled in, though I fight with Kushal as much as ever. Atal makes us all laugh. He uses very dramatic language and is so full of energy that he also makes us all tired. He got a lot of attention and praise when the film He Named Me Malala was released around the world. We all did, but a lot more people got to see how Atal is like the little squirrel. It was strange the first time I watched this movie about my life and our family. Even though I had always already been told my story in a book, this was different. I felt shy about it, but I know that the more people who learn about my story, the more people will hear my message, and the more of a chance we will have of achieving the goal of education for all. In fact, the movie released in the United States around the time of the UN's General Assembly. So the same week that I attended my movie premiere in New York City, I also made another speech at the UN, this time as part of the launch of the Sustainable Development Summit, where I urged world leaders to support quality education for all children. I even spoke at the Global Citizen Festival in Central Park with 4 of my friends, including Shazia and Kainat. It was the largest crowd I've ever addressed. Nearly 60,000 people were there. People like Ed Sheeran, Beyonce, and Coldplay performed at this festival to raise awareness about the UN's global goals, which seek to fight inequality and extreme poverty. When it was my turn to be on stage, I spoke about the 66 million girls around the world who are deprived of education, and how my dream is for everyone to live in peace and for education to be the top priority of these goals. Because how can we fight inequality and poverty when so many are denied the right to education? When I think of all the people I've spoken to and the places I have traveled in the last couple of years, it amazes me. And yet still I feel I can always do more. Though through the Malala Fund, I decided to advocate for the education of Syrian refugees. I went to the Syrian border and witnessed scores of refugees fleeing into Jordan. They had walked through the desert to get there with just the clothes on their backs. Many children had no shoes. I broke down and cried as I witnessed their suffering. In the refugee settlements, most of the children were not going to school. Sometimes there was no school. Sometimes it was unsafe to walk to school, and sometimes children were working instead of being educated because their fathers had been killed. I just felt such pain in my heart. What is their sin? What have they done that they've had to migrate? Why are these innocent children suffering such hardship? Why are they deprived of school in a peaceful environment? I met a girl called Mizun, who was my age. Every day, she goes from tent to tent trying to persuade people to send their children to school. She told me that she wants to be a journalist so she can help people understand what's going on. I asked her, if you could do anything, what would you do? And she said, I want to see my home again and stop these wars. I spent my 17th birthday in Nigeria, showing solidarity with the schoolgirls abducted from their dormitory in the dead of night by Boko Haram militants in April 2014. Those girls were my age and all had dreams of being doctors or teachers or scientists. They were very brave and special girls, as only 4% of girls in northern Nigeria finished school. The world easily moves on to other issues, and I don't want people to forget. We will have another Malala Fund project there. In October of that year, almost 2 years to the day after I was attacked, I received an honor so great I could hardly believe it was real. I became the youngest person ever to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. I was at school in my chemistry class when I found out. The deputy head teacher came into the classroom and called me outside. Was I in trouble? I wondered. Had I done something wrong? When she told me I had won the Nobel Peace Prize alongside children's rights activist Kailash Satyarthi, I was shocked. I responded very formally. I thanked her for the news and said that I was honored. It was only when I saw tears in my teacher's eyes when they came up to congratulate me that the meaning of the news really sank in. Everyone was so happy for me, and I was happy too, because the cause that had been a part of my life for so long had been recognized in such an important way. The teachers called an assembly, and I was asked to speak in front of the whole school. I was so nervous. Speaking in front of your teachers and fellow students is much scarier than addressing the UN. I'm not sure I remember what I said, but I think it was about education, women's rights, and peace. Straight after that, I went to my physics class. I did not leave school until the school day was over. I am so grateful that the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to recognize the rights of children. And the more I learned about Kailash, the more precious it felt to me to be sharing the award with him. I was humbled to meet his kind and committed man. He leads by example, showing that adults have the responsibility to protect children and recognize their rights. He shows that love exists and that our kindness and care can make a huge difference. He works tirelessly and rescues children from slavery and child labor. The ceremony itself was beautiful and inspiring. I was so happy to be joined by my brave friends from Pakistan, Nigeria, and Syria, including Shazia and Kainat and Mizun. They have also had to stand up for their rights. It meant so much to me that we could experience the Nobel ceremony together. In the last year, I have worked tirelessly in my role as an education activist through the Malala Fund. I've traveled in conflict-hit areas to raise awareness about the plight of children who are deprived of an education. I've started projects in Jordan, Pakistan, Kenya, and Nigeria. On my 18th birthday, I returned to the Syrian border to open a school in Lebanon for refugee children and to demand that world leaders invest in books, not bullets. I have tried to raise awareness about the plight of refugees to help increase support for them. I've spoken to world leaders and encouraged them to raise the education budgets of their countries and push powerful nations to give greater education aid to developing ones. At the Malala Fund, we are growing our work every day, but I know there is much left to do. I thank God that I have been given this platform. This is now my life's work, my mission, and my dream. So much has changed these past few years, but really, I am the same old Malala who is going to school in SWAT. My life has changed, but I have not. If you were to ask my mother, she would say, well, maybe Malala has become wiser, but she's still the same quarrelsome girl at home whose shirt is in one place, trousers in another. The same messy girl who's always crying, I haven't done my homework. Some things, even if they are small, do stay the same. Many of our friends back in Pakistan probably think we are very lucky to live in England in such a nice brick house and go to good schools. My father is education attaché for the Pakistan Consultant and an advisor for global education for the UN. It would be a dream life for many young, ambitious Pakistanis. But when you are exiled from your homeland, where your father and forefathers were born and where you have centuries of history, it's very painful. You can no longer touch the soil or hear the sweet sounds of the rivers. Fancy hotels and meetings in palaces cannot replace the sense of your true home. All of us have been overwhelmed by the warm reception we have received around the world and the reaction to the books and film, which have helped people to understand our story. When I get prizes, I send the money to SWAT to help children go to school or adults buy small businesses, like a shop or a taxi, to drive so that they can earn money for their families. We have received many letters, even one from an elderly man in Japan who wrote, I am an old, poor man, but I want to help, and sent us a note for 10,000 yen without a return address so that we couldn't thank him. It is people's love and encouragement that gives me the energy to continue my fight. I will never give up on advocating for peace and education for all. I want to build schools and make sure these are qualified teachers in as many places as I can. That is something else that hasn't changed. I am the same stubborn girl who will never give up. All right, fifth graders, that is the end of our book. I'm really looking forward to discussing it with you, what you think of Malala, what we think of her story. All right, that is all.